Welcome to the Calgary Sessions. This is episode number 85. I'm your host, Jeff Humphreys. Today's guest, I have no idea where this is going to go, but off camera, we already had a wild connection going to the same high school, so I feel like this one's just going to like click and go. So please name and who you are.
My name is Luke Obodzinski.
No, don't ask me to say that.
I was about 9 years old when I learned how to spell my last name, so Polish Canadian. Grew up in the mean streets of Warsaw, and then my parents immigrated to Canada when I was 10, 11.
Yep.
I got a rad little family. I got a wife named Lisa, who's a WestJetter.
Yep.
2 boys, 5 and 6, a 7-year-old golden retriever. 2 passions in life. One is traveling the world. We do a lot of adventure traveling with my wife. So several times throughout the year, we're off just exploring places we've never explored for the most part.
Cool.
And my other passion is building homes, right? But in layman's terms, when people say, "What do?" I just say, I babysit adults. So that's kind of like the simple way of what I think a lot of people do in life. I just do it on a construction site than in a different environment.
Awesome. That the construction industry is interesting to me because I grew up in it.
Yeah?
My dad was framed and built houses and did renos for
Framing's the best part, really.
for 35 years. So I grew up on job sites from the age of 13 to my early 20s.
Yeah?
So
awesome.
So the building side of the city has always been interesting to me.
Yep.
I'm always, when I'm driving through neighborhoods, I always take snapshots of the builder signs on the fences just to have an idea of who's doing what. It's been in me for a long time. So it's always cool to sit down with, because I've seen your brand for a long time. So it's cool to get this opportunity to sit down and hear your story.
Yeah, well, we also grew up in construction because when we were younger, we'd get in trouble in school or somewhere else. My dad would be like, "You guys aren't grounded. You're coming to frame," right? And it's like, doesn't matter if it's summer or winter. And it's like sometimes like minus 20, you get in trouble at school and you're on the roof holding a piece of plywood and it's like minus 20 wind chill. You're like, oh man, that's a bigger punishment than sitting in your room for a day.
Totally.
But joke's on him because look at me now.
I'm
on the roof and I love it.
This would be a fun one. I think you've seen a couple of these. So you have
absolutely. Yeah. Great work. Big fan. Yeah.
Thank you. You have a loose idea where this is about to go. So take it back as far as you want to go. So, where you grew up, how you grew up, your parents' influence, your family influence, and we'll kind of weave our way to where you are today.
Yeah. So we have a memory conversation with my wife a lot. So she's a photographer, so my kids are growing up with a million photos in a month, right? Like just a lot of photography, everything we do. They're perfect posers. You know how to smile, how not to look at the camera, whatever she wants to capture. And it's amazing, right? For a lifetime, we'll have these memories. But my parents didn't really grow up with a camera. I probably have 8 photos till we moved to Canada till I was 11 years old. So, which begs the conversation of like, when you remember stuff, like, do you remember it from your memory or do you remember it because you saw a photo of you doing that certain thing, right? Because I'm like, I don't think I have a lot of memories compared to my wife. She's like, oh, we did this. I was like, how do you remember this? And I think she remembers it from a photo that her parents took, and it kind of brings all those things back.
Yeah.
So through my very few memories, I'll recollect, right? So we grew up in Poland in the 80s, which was under the Russian sphere of influence, the communist bloc. Very modest beginnings, a very loving home, like amazing. Not just my parents, my whole family's amazing. Like really tight with all my uncles and cousins and aunts. Till this day, we go back quite a lot, and it's like you don't see him for a year or two, and you can come in and sit down and have a 6-hour conversation and catch up. It's like it's such a gift that I'm blessed to kind of come from that environment. When I say humble beginnings, there was 12 of us living in like a 1,200 square foot house. So it was kind of like 2 floors, no basement. So each floor had a kitchen and 2 bedrooms. And we're upstairs, so we shared a kitchen. And then me, my brother, my parents were in one room, and then my great grandpa and my uncle were in the other room. And kind of same setup downstairs. As a kid, you don't know any better. It's actually really awesome. You're just living in this full house with like built-in cousins, built-in best friends. All the kids on the block are like, hey, I want to play there. Like, look how much fun they're having. There's so many of them, right? And part of that is like, so the political climate was communism. And then what my parents kind of encountered, what a lot of parents encountered is how do we motivate our children to follow something, to follow a trade or school or something? Because when you graduate, you're gonna do what you're told in a way, not to that extreme, but it's like we tell our children in Western society, be like, okay, go to school, educate, because you're gonna have all these doors that are open up for you. Whether in communism, you're all walking through the same door, right? So if you go to school for 8 years or you go to school for 0 years of post-secondary, same opportunities are to you presented. So my parents were like, how do we push that onto our kids when they see there is no reward to get educated? So we had some family in Canada and Calgary, and my dad came out for a visit. He loved it, and then I heard about it. They're like, my parents made a decision that we'll come here for a year, and if we love it, we'll stay. If we hate it, we'll go back, right? And ever since then, we're proud Calgarians now. Like the Polish heritage is always in me.
Yep.
But Calgary and Canada has been really good to us. My dad followed, I call it the Canadian version of the American dream. Like came here with $200 to Toronto.
What year was this?
He came in '89, so we're actually apart for 18 months, which was like, it's a big sacrifice. I don't know how people immigrate. It's like, that's pretty brave to, like leave your whole world and no internet before, like phone's expensive. You're going into the dark to make a new life for yourself, right? Because you really believe that you can make it better, right? So he came in '89, we came in '91.
So what was he doing? He went to Toronto first?
Toronto, $200, spent $100 on a bus ticket to Calgary, 48 or 72 hours later arrived. Then stayed with our family, and after a while, he was bored, so he was kind of helping out. And then once he got his paperwork to kind of work, he discovered that he could make more in one day in Canada, work like almost a minimum wage job as he would a month back home. Wow. So he's like, okay, well, I'll stay for 6 months, like make a little money, we'll finish the house. And then somewhere during that time, he's just like, this place is awesome, right? It's like, why would I not want my wife and my kids to be here? So we came. We settled in Brayside, like the Southwest, and like a real Calgarian. I've never crossed the river, It's from.
Isn't that so fun? Because I'm the same way.
Yeah,
born in the Southwest.
Everybody is.
Haven't crossed the river.
If someone crosses the river, you're not from Calgary. You don't bullshit me, man. It's like we don't do it.
It's so funny.
It's sometimes we build spec houses for work, and sometimes they're in the north, sometimes they're in the south. And when people look at the north, if they like, hey, do you have anything else? We're like, we do, but it's in the south. And it's like that conversation always ends. Like no one is willing to cross the river. Totally. It's such a Calgarian thing.
Yep. What year was that? So you were 11 when you came to?
Yeah. So we started a year earlier in Canada. So I finished grade 4 back home and then just missed grade 5 entirely and went into grade 6 in here. Not a word of English, right? My parents like put us into like English lessons, but at that age, like we were just messing around with my brother, like not learning anything. So we went to St. Cyril's, they had an ESL program, which was great.
What was that like? Like, I can't imagine, as going into grade 6, not knowing the language, kids being kids.
Yeah.
Like what's actually happening?
I think at that point, maybe I wasn't like, my brain wasn't as developed to kind of like really get that major shock. I think my brother, a little bit older, had a little bit of a tougher time.
Yeah.
But for me, he just sit there, and eventually like I had a really cool teacher, and it's like when people were doing schoolwork, he'd be like, hey, come play chess. And I'd like play chess with him. And then during ESL, like the teacher would let us read the sports section. So I'm a huge Flames fan because she always claims I learn English through following Flames news, right? It's like in the morning you wake up, you're like, hey, it's like Joe Nundyk scored. And it's like this, pronouncing it all weird, but she's like, that's how you learn English.
And that's probably a big piece of it, right? Because you're actually interested in figuring out what was being said.
100%, right? You're interested in the sports, so you kind of start following it. Met some friends, right? Obviously.
Was that, sorry, I'm gonna jump on you all over the place, but the Polish community,
huge.
When you land in Calgary, does it kind of wrap? Do they wrap their arms around you, and do you kind of have like these home bases in Calgary?
So it's almost. I'd imagine there's a lot of cultural circles like that in Calgary. Like Polish one, I think is huge. I think when they did a census in Calgary 10 years ago, there was close to 50,000 people that identified as Polish, right? So growing up, you kind of lead like these parallel lives. You have like your English school life and like your Polish life. So, we landed on like a Thursday. On Saturday, I was at Polish school, Polish scouts, soccer, dancing, like the culture, right? So my parents thought that would actually help us out, which I think it did, because we made friends that spoke our language and kind of this. And I'm friends to this day with people I met like 2 days into landing, right?
Crazy.
So my buddy Greg, we had the families camping for Father's Day. He was in my class. He's the first person I met in Canada, and like we're still homeboys to this day. Crazy. So those parallels are kind of cool. Like they're so cool that kind of like you get this and kind of like same values, same backgrounds. Like our parents, care about the same things. Yeah. So very cool to kind of do that. Going to school 6 days a week. Not a school, like, hey man, I'm making my kids do it. Like they're probably gonna be that cool. But my kid's like, yo, dad, I got soccer. Be like, okay, well, you're gonna play at school, go to soccer, come back to school. But really big community. So you have like also like connections, and now in the business world, like too, like, hey, well, you just know just more people because you have another circle that right? And lots of trades in that. So for construction, for what we do is like really, really helpful.
So you get here.
Yeah.
Going to school, kind of obviously meet some lifelong friends.
Early. Off the bat.
So what are your parents up to at this point? Like, what are they, for your dad to, come scout the place out? And what's he looking at for an opportunity?
So I think a lot of people, when they come to Canada, like the language is such a barrier for most people. Like some people will come from countries that English is widely spoken. So when they come to Canada, it's easy breezy, It's like a lot of people that come from Philippines, like beautiful English, like they speak it every day. Like a lot of major parts of like India, they speak beautiful English because it's one of their languages, right? Poland, it's like the Russian sphere of influence. Like we're learning Russian, the Russians were learning English, right? Because they're like, no, we want to we want you to control you guys. So we had no English, so he comes. A lot of people, they don't know the language. You got to work with your hands, right? You're a blue collar worker, so. He did a little bit of construction back home. So one thing he got into was actually framing, right? And it's like so rewarding because I feel like in a lot of jobs, like you finish your workday and it's like, what did I accomplish, right? Some days it doesn't feel like a lot, but when you're working physically and you're building, especially framing, you're like, well, I did this, right? Like it's so rewarding to actually do something and see it right away. Like the fruits of your labor. Yeah. So he did framing. Soon enough, he kind of opened up his own crew, and then down the road, when the time was right, my parents built a house for all of us down in Woodlands, and then got a transition into the family business of home building. Went from framing to home building, which he still does to this day. And then my mom was. She was a dying breed of travel agents, right? It's so she did that for a long time before the advent of the internet. So. So they were kind of going along, learning English, making friends, kind of like probably way different challenges than as a kid. Like if you had to move somewhere, right? It's but when you talk to expats, Canadians that go somewhere else, you're friends with a lot of Canadians too, right? So you gotta find your people wherever you are in the world. Yeah. And they've done really well. Like Calgary, Canada has been so good to our family. Like everything we have here, it's truly the land of opportunity that you can come. And the interesting thing is like a lot of new wave of immigrants, people like, oh, you should have came here during the boom years. It's like same thing people said to my dad, right? People like, hey, you're too late. You'll never make it, right? But hey, you work hard. You show some dedication to your craft, and you can make a good life out here. Yeah, so it's really good.
And it's not you can say that like work hard, and it's very basic, right? And it is. And sometimes it gets overlooked. Like people just expect a quick win. Yeah. And they don't want to put the work in.
And I think that's one of the things for entrepreneurship, like one of the major pillars of the concept of the show is work. And you're not going to see the fruits of your labor right away, depending on your industry, like what you're into, right? A lot of people transition from a side hustle to a full-time job. Yeah. And that could be a period of time that it's kind of like, you're not doing it for the money, right? Like there's a lot of years that you're grinding it out, it's like your friends are doing fun stuff, this and that. You're after hours, you're kind of like, hey, this is my craft, I'm into it, I love it. Yeah, you love it. It doesn't feel like work, but it's there's a portion, there's a period of time, there's a lot of sacrifice about a lot of payback. So it's like in hindsight, you're like, yeah, that's a lot of hard work. And when you're in it, you're just doing it because you love it, right? Yeah. But the concept is not hard, right? Like some integrity, keep your word, work hard. Things pay off, right?
It's so basic.
There you guys go. Business 201. Case closed. Should we move on to 301 microeconomics or what?
I'm not that smart. So let's wind it back to what you're up to, as you're kind of getting in junior high and high school, like what you're, how comfortable you were in the city and what you're up to.
Yeah, so junior high, no language skills. So I could have made friends with guys that were just like doing funny things in class, like guys that would make me laugh. And it's like what I call them my friends, the teachers and my parents would call them bad influence, right? Because it's like they're doing stuff they shouldn't be, but I don't have no idea what's going on. They're just funny, right? So after junior high, like all my friends went to Bishop Grandin, so my parents are like, no, you're doing what all the other Polish kids in the city are doing. You're going to St. Mary's,
and
right?
And like we just talked about, I'm a Mary's alumni, and there was a lot of Polish students there.
If you're Polish, you had to go to St. Mary's, right? So only knew a couple of people going into high school. My brother was 2 years up, which kind of like helped with a lot. Obviously, I had a whole Polish society to lean on, so I kind of rolling those circles, rolling with just regular kids.
Yep. Do you have more memories? Do your memories start becoming more clear, more vivid in like junior high and high school once you're in Canada?
Well, tying those in, because more photos. And I don't know if it's recent, like how many memories, like when you classify, like how many memories do you have when you're prior to 10 years old?
Pretty vague, like more like just like snapshots in time, definitely like being outside and being active, just like little moments of things. Not really, more like, recess and just riding my bike, but I don't have like these pivotal moments that I remember.
So maybe like formative years, you're learning more life lessons. So I think those things gonna stick to you certain moments in time, but definitely a lot more memories than from age 11 and prior. So St. Mary's down the street, cool school to kind of go to, really close to downtown.
It's different, hey? Going, coming from, Woodlands, Braeside area, coming to downtown to school, it's a different vibe down here.
Lunchtime, you go down 17th Ave and there's like different things going on than there would be probably many other high schools, right? So it's a lot of good, a lot of bad things. You're just exposed to more things, but that's part of life, just being exposed to things kind of makes you a more rounder person, which we believe in the traveling part, which we'll probably touch on later, just being exposed to more and more things. So it's probably a good part of it.
Yeah, even for me, it was like riding the train down, getting off at the bay down on First Street.
Yeah.
And either taking the train all the way to Stampede Park or actually walking straight down First Street.
Yeah, so with a few detours being late.
And just like, and so it's like first thing in the morning, and you can imagine the people that are out and about first thing. So at a young age, you're being, like you said, exposed to a bunch of different scenarios.
Yeah.
Which doesn't really change you, but you get to see things that are different.
That's right. Yeah, you kind of forms your lens of how you see different things, right?
So were you working through high school? Were you playing sports through high school? What were you doing?
It's not a lot of sports, just kind of like a lot of hanging out with like my friends, like a lot of partying actually, like really young age, even starting in junior high, right? We used to like grade 9, ride our bikes down to the reservoir, the fire, some underage drinks and stuff. Yeah. Like now you look back, you're like, man, that's like really, really young, right? Or like lots of partying years early and through my 20s kind of thing. Little bit of sports, not as probably as much as kids grew up these days. Like my kids are into like so many activities. And it's funny because like when I'm looking back, it's like when I grew up in Poland, like that wasn't a major part of the thing. Because I was trying to figure it out, like why are so many kids into like so many activities here? But like when I was growing up, no one was into nothing. Like I don't know if it's because everyone's poor back home or like it wasn't it, right? And then when we jumped across, just kind of never got involved in as many of those things as probably my peers did or some kids. Or maybe the circles I ran with, they were just more down for riding bikes and getting in trouble, just like regular kid stuff. Yeah.
It's interesting though, because not like you just said, your kids are being exposed to all these different activities.
Yeah.
Maybe there's more infrastructure in place now.
Yeah.
Maybe there's more organizations, that put on these events or these whatever. Like it's something's changed.
100%. Yeah, I go out and talk to my cousins like how many activities like their kids are doing back in Europe, right? Like I also feel like, and I don't know if this is a North American thing or a worldwide thing. Like we also think like we're also like over parenting a little bit, so maybe we're just pushing our kids into like too many things. So for the summertime, like my kids love soccer, so they're doing soccer, but for these like 4 months that we get what we call summer, it's like, you guys are outside, there's lots of kids out, ride your bike, do whatever you want. A little bit less structured. And then winter months when you can't go outside, we were doing some hip hop, some snowboarding, skating, like a lot of activities daily, swimming, and then summertime we're kind of letting off and kind of let them just be kids and just throw them around. So that's interesting. And then obviously like out of high school, I actually developed more things like just big love for the mountains. I don't snowboard. I know you're into water skiing. Did lots of wakeboarding for a part of my life through a girl I knew at Chestermere, and then my friend had a boat out in Kukanusa. So it's like
boat life,
best days. And it's like you're in a boat in the summertime. It doesn't get better than that, right? So it's now just like full on into like what my kids are into. Like a lot of my elders, they say, there's like a section of your life that's like 10 years that it's like your kids think you're like the greatest shit in the world, right? And I'm in it, and I want to be in it, and it's like they're on this so little for so long. So it's like I want to be there like super heavily involved. So like everything else outside of like, my relationship with my wife and work is kind of back burner because I know these years will pass and our relationship will change and they'll have less time for me. So then maybe I'll pursue more of my other interests once we're out of these like what I call like the golden years of the kids. And it's,
you've been really thoughtful about this?
Very much so.
Did somebody kind of plant the seed with you, or was it something you figured out that this chunk of time is really important?
I think through many different sections, right? Like lots of great family role models in my life, right? From my family, like extended family, even like my wife's family, like very tight family unit. And my brother-in-law always said, it's like, they're only so little for so long, right? Like take advantage of it. And even now it's like, I already see like they're not little anymore, right? So very, very cautious. And I also approached it from backwards perspective. So I got a couple of friends and their dad does like everything with us when we do boys trips. Like, it's kind of like, hey, let's go fishing. Well, Jerry's coming, right? And it's kind of like, and I look backwards to be like, how did that relationship, like they're men, they're 40 years old, and their dad's always hanging with us when we're doing all these out of town boys things. And it's kind of like, he was there for everything, right? So it's kind of like, he wasn't lenient, like he was super strict. They were scared shitless of him all the time, but it's like they did a lot of things together. So I'm applying the same philosophy to me, right? So we're gonna like, we camp, we fish, you play ball. It's kind of like all these things that hopefully all those hobbies will continue. So then when we're older, we get to continue those things and have that relationship down the road. So that's, that's the blueprint. I'll let you know how it works out.
We'll catch up in 15, 20 years.
Episode 485.
Yeah, exactly.
The follow-up.
The truth.
Yeah.
So what happens out of high school? I'm guessing you just kind of get through high school and do your thing, and then where's your interest at that point?
Just not sure what I want to do, right?
Kind of lost, or just the regular program didn't seem to fit for you, like, the traditional path of doctor, lawyer, engineer.
None of those things kind of appealed, right? It's like Harvard Business School did this study that's like, hey, kids that have a plan going to post-secondary, like 98% were so successful. I'm like, well, if you already know what you want to do, it's pretty easy to kind of follow the steps. But if you don't know, and maybe you don't have the people to point you into non-traditional streams of learning or experience of education, it's a little bit tougher.
Do you remember the conversations with the counselors at Mary's?
Oh, it was very short. This is how I went. Which is funny. I've thought about this because it came out during one of your previous shows. I went in there. I forgot the lady's name, but she sat there. She's like, "What would you like to do?" I was like, "I'd like to be an architect," which is so fitting now that it's like back then I didn't know I would be a builder, And she like opened this book.
An architect was a little off the board, right?
I think so. There's not a lot of people into it.
Yeah.
And she's like, "Well, you're gonna need an 86." She's like, "Do you have that?" I'm like, "No." And she like closed the book, and that was it. And like now I think back, I was like, damn, lady, you need to get trained up a little bit on your like skills here. Like some kids tell you what you want to do, and you're just telling them you're not going to make it.
Yeah.
So, but regardless, that thought came back to me kind of like recently. So graduated, like my parents like pushing for school. So
just because they felt like it was a safe option.
Ties into why they came here, like education,
an opportunity.
Yeah, right. So went to Mount Royal, and it was so funny. We had this bet with we had 4 friends. Like, we took calculus, and we're like, hey, we're all motivated. We're all gonna put in $250. Whoever gets the highest mark, $1,000. We all get an F. No one wins the money. Right? Just like, oh, not good. Like a lot of fun, like doing funny stuff around school, like really fun. As far as getting an education, not so good, right? So then went to UFC for a year. Didn't like it as much, I just find that UFC was just really like research based, and you had to be like really.
What were you taking there?
Just like just general studies, I want to say, and really like focus based or like research based.
Yeah.
And then so went back to Mount Royal.
Were you working through university?
Yeah, so like through high school, we were like delivering flyers, like junior high even, right? It's kind of like you're so young. My parents really instilled like, hey, you got to work. Like, hey, we're all working to kind of make ends meet. So I used to deliver flyers. Yep. Did a couple of restaurant gigs and then did a long stretch for a catering company out of Spruce Meadows, actually.
Yeah.
That we used to just work there all summers, like crazy long hours, but you were able to just have so many hours that maybe throughout the year you don't have to work as much.
Yep.
And also, like, save that money, did a little traveling. So that was kind of like just be working for a catering company, just on a golf cart all summer and just delivering food to random spots at Spruce Meadows. Like, really good group of guys. Like, everybody you work with was just really, really awesome, amazing. Like, a really good experience.
Cool.
And experience the hard work, right? Like, working 12, 14-hour days in a way.
Work.
So it's, and then school hits, just going to concentrate on school, hang out, and
get your Fs.
Things. Yeah, early on, right?
So what happened after UFC? You kind of went there for a year?
Went back to Mount Royal. They kind of figured I was like, hey, always been interested in entrepreneurship. So they had a program. It's called, like doctors have like Dr. Jeff Humphreys, MD.
Yep.
So our program was BABE, which is like Bachelor of Applied Business and Entrepreneurship. So we always crack jokes about it. It's like, oh, babe.
That's cool.
So did an entrepreneurship program, which is almost like a double major with entrepreneurship and IT, because I thought I was going to go into IT, which kind of changed along the way. I always wanted to be a business owner, like the appeal of like being able to hustle and make something for it, or if you don't do nothing, you get nothing, right? Like that mentality was really something that appealed to me.
Was that, did you always know that? Like, so here's my, where the root of this question's coming from. So in high school, I was like so lost with what I wanted to do. Getting like 57, 58, 59 in all my classes. Yeah. Didn't fit anywhere. Didn't understand where I was going to fit in the work world.
Yeah.
And it was just the idea of starting my business I didn't think about it then.
Yeah.
Because back then it wasn't really on the table as, there wasn't a lot of people doing their own thing. My dad was a fireman. Mom was taking care of the family. So, it was just anybody who owned their own business was kind of a unicorn.
Yeah.
So it wasn't really in my mind, right? I was like, these traditional paths don't work, so I'm going to keep on banging my head against the wall till I break.
Yeah.
But were you thinking then that...
We were, and even like we started a business, my brother, when we were, I want to say 19 years old, and it was a window washing business. So in the summertime, we're kind of like, Tom used to work at Earl's, and it was like, back then it was less than $5 minimum wage. And then we're like, one of my mom's friends asked us to wash her windows, and my dad had ladders. Like, sure, we'll do it. And she gave us $40. We're like, what? We're like, hey, we're onto something. So we're like, we had an old bucket, a whole bunch of rags, my mom's like dish soap, and my dad's ladder. And we went down the block, and after a week of doing this, we could literally one got a small ladder, one got a big ladder. We could do an average 1,800 square foot house in 10 minutes.
Cool.
And we're making $40 every 10 minutes. Mm-hmm. And we'd go out there a day and we'd make $500-600. But then being at that age, you do that one day, next like, hey, I got all this money, let's hang out. Let's do something. 4 days, no work. Yeah. Then it rains for 2 days, you can't work. Then you go out one more day. So, but you got introduced being hey, there's ways to make money more than the traditional route where you go punch in, punch out, and this is what you get. You go back to hey, you're going to hustle, you're going to work hard in these stretches, and your return on your time is so much more than working a traditional job. Mm-hmm. So, did a couple of random things like that in our 20s.
Yep. Just kind of planted the seed.
Planted the seed, right? And then I had a really cool route all the way to actually joining, doing the family business. I kind of checked off all sectors, right? First job out of school, small startup, couple guys that graduated a year before me. Urban Lighthouse, they took me on, I was their employee number 2, had their faith in me, awesome environment, awesome guys, awesome work, lots of learning, right? But a startup, like the money's not as good as you join a corporation, right? So I was there for a time being. I don't even remember how long. Like in hindsight, if I would have continued on the IT side, I probably should have stayed there because I was just learning so much, right? And I think it's something that a lot of fresh graduates forget about, right? It's like you want to get in a place where you're learning more so than the money. Like the money will come eventually, but you just want to learn. So I was in a small startup that I did a stretch at Calgary Board of Education, which kind of like they coincided with our love for traveling. So, I'd work for a few months, then it'd be like, hey, in these 4 months, like we're going to go here. We're going to go travel the world. And I came back, studied the Calgary Board of Education, which was a government, obviously, organization, like way different way they run things, right? I don't want to get anybody in trouble, but not a lot of motivation for the employees, right? I went traveling, came back, did a corporate job, like environment, like well-run shop, like a I don't know if it's weird, but their bonus structure reflected in a way that actually reflected really individual accomplishment. So when I came on, I was, like learning a new program stuff. No one was really willing to teach me because it was taken away from their time to achieve their bonuses and their goals. Which, like, when you look at it from a business case perspective, is something to kind of ponder. And then obviously travel, and then came back, and then worked for a not-for-profit just down the street called Canadian Outcomes Research Institute. And they always said, we can't pay you like the corporate world, but we'll teach you way better. And they lived to it, right? Like a really, really good work environment, and we're doing something really good. So basically, they were an umbrella organization for all the non-for-profits in all of Canada. So what we would do is we would help the non-for-profit groups establish goals and outcomes. So just because a women's shelter is taking this amount of women every day and then they're releasing them, like, how do we know how much good they're doing, right? So we're like, okay, well, this is a goal you're trying to reach, and these is how you measure it. And then at the end of your program or these milestones, you're like, hey, we're doing really good. We're accomplishing what we're going to do. So we're kind of involved in that. I was on the IT side. There was people of the program, but you're exposed to it all. And it's like very rewarding work, like good work environment. It's, it was awesome. And then unfortunately run out of funds, they run out of funding, and then they folded. And at that point, it was just a jumping off point. We were doing the building on the side. And it kind of went from the stars align, you went from part-time to like full-time, and then kind of have stayed full-time. And even we went full-time for a long time. The love of traveling is still strong. So we get to go away lots. Like when we're here, we kind of work more than average person, but my weeks away is significantly more than other people. So it's a good life balance, and having a family business, that's one of the key things, is the flexibility around that, right? So when I'm gone, my brother Tom, my dad's still partially involved. Heavily involved, like, we keep telling him not to work so much. He's almost around age, but he just loves it so much, right? There's no, like, we can't just tell him, like, you don't come into work. It's like, it's his passion. He saw it from infancy to where we are now. So working with family, and we all kind of have the same kind of idea of, like, my brother loves traveling or the world, so does my dad. So we kind of balance it out. And then so there's always a couple guys on the ground from the core team to help manage things, while someone else is somewhere else just doing other things.
So what's with the traveling? And I don't travel. Like, I've been maybe quite enough places in the States, Mexico, Hawaii, and Thailand. And that's it. And a little bit across Canada, like BC, the Maritimes a couple times, lived in Ontario, but that's it. I don't have this thing. I don't have this drive to go explore.
A lot of people don't. It's like you meet people like us, but there's not many people that have this drive to, like, literally see it all. And my wife has higher drive to see it all than I do now, so she definitely pushes the envelope. So like last summer we went to Kenya, Uganda, and Rwanda.
Wow.
Right? So like places that are not on people's lists. But during one of our other travels, I saw a video where you got to walk with the silverback gorillas, right, in the wild, right? That it's kind of like the one moment in the last 5 years where, like, the whole world stopped is when we were in the jungle and this big silverback starts charging, and the guide in front of us is like, hold still. And you're like, am I holding still or am I running for my life, right? And just experiencing things, like getting to do stuff that you can't do at home, like different food. Like now that we're older and we can afford to get food, you know, like being a foodie and just traveling, trying the craziest things, right? When we were camping, I was just telling one of the kids, the 7-year-old's like, what's the craziest thing you've ate? I was like, I ate a dog in China. And they're like, what? Like, just blew their mind. I was like a little piece because I'm like, smell the chance to try it. But like, no, the dogs will hate me, right? But it's like, you're there. So it's like, you just try to say yes to as many things as you can. So like the first trip, like 19 years old, just kind of did like the Europe kind of trip and kind of got hooked. And then went to Asia. And then you're just like, you know, at that age, you're just like, woo, hang on, you know, buckle up. Yeah. This is the ride. Yeah. So I spent a year abroad. Then went away to school just before that, spent a season snowboarding in Austria with one of my buddies. You know, like for a year, actually, I missed that part of the story. Like, when I was trying to figure out school, was like, hey, I'm going to go travel. So did a ski season in Austria, and then went to Australia, and then Southeast Asia, kind of traveled back. And then just the way you live and you meet people and experience new things was like really, really cool. Yeah. And then, so that's going to continue. Now we kind of do it differently first as a couple and then as a family, we do different things. But it's like seeing it through my kids' eyes and how different cultures interact. It's like, it's so cool. Like we seem to be like so hands off, whether you travel, like we were just in Indonesia, was it in the fall of the kids, right? And just the way they interact, like there is no like in here, like you can't touch on their kids. Like over there, like random strangers picking up my kids and kissing them on the cheek, right? And it's like, it's cool, right? And when I asked my kids what was favorite, well, one was like the water park, but two is like we rented scooters, you know, and I'm doubling my kid on a scooter. So is my wife, and we're just ripping around these islands, like watching beaches and waterfalls, eating crazy stuff. And it's kind of like stuff you'd never be able to do here. Right. And the more we did it, the more so you had this like first to see the whole world. And then part of it is kind of like, I want to be able to talk to anybody and be like, I've been to where you are from, right? And there's not a lot of places. Now it's like, now I really want to go to Eritrea because there's a big Eritrean community in Calgary and there's a lot of guys that work. And I want to be like, hey, I ate what you eat at home. Like I've been to your country, right? Like I find that like really cool. And it's just like, people are just like, what? You went to my country? And it's like, it's just a jumping off point. And it's like, you always imagine things how they are somewhere. And then you go there and you're just like, you know, it's like this, right? And it's just kind of like, if anybody mentions anything in the world, you have a frame of reference to it, right?
Personal. So, it's not from a movie. It's actually like a personal experience.
Yeah, right. So that's really cool. And then right before we got married, so 10 years ago, we spent 6 months in South America, and then we did Antarctica. We did 10 days on an ice-breaking ship. So then got, you know, the 7th continent, and then now just kind of like filling in the little holes. Cool. But I must say, I'm almost done my list. Like only a few places I really want to go that we haven't gone to, and there's some places. They don't pull me as much. We're almost at 100 countries that we've been to. But, you know, my wife always wins these arguments. So we'll probably be going to like pretty crazy places that I probably couldn't point on a map 10 years ago.
Is it a constant conversation, like during the year, you know,
100%.
Like planning, just kind of envisioning where you want to go, what you want to experience, putting some ideas out there and kind of working towards it, finding your timeline?
Yeah. So my wife really followed her dream and became a flight attendant. So she went to UFC. So she did the opposite, right? Like she really got educated. She went to business. She went to Schulich School of Business. And her parents, you know, all proud, you know, like business school graduate. She comes home and she's like, Mom and Dad, you know, I'm going to become a flight attendant. They're like, oh my God, like we did all of this for you to go to school and now you're going to be a flight attendant? And she's like, but, you know, as parents, you guys get benefits. Like, what a great job. Right? So then we laugh about that all the time. But we both have the bug, right? And then at least that's probably a little bit more in the driver's seat being like, hey, I want to do this. So the big one for her, she wants to like go through all the stands. So like, you know, Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, all those, like there's a lot of like crazy hikes and there's places where you don't see a lot of tourists, like like everybody travels now, so some of the European places can be quite crowded, not as authentic. So we're gonna go to places where not a lot of people go, just a different experience. And we can cover that on episode 485.
Yeah, 175 later.
We'll come back to that.
So go back to just kind of started getting into the business, getting into the family biz. Like, where's it at? How did it start? When did you kind of, you know, after the not-for-profit place, what did it kind of look like getting into it?
Yeah, so in a way, it's kind of like, you know, a lot of guys in the trades, they have this dream of doing something bigger, right? Like they're, you know, it's like, it's hard work. Like you put in an honest day's work, but it's hard. You know, it's like I framed with my dad for a while. Yeah, like in winter, it's so rewarding, but wintertime, it's so cold. It's after like skiing all day, like your face is burning up. Like you don't want to go out at night. Summertime, it's the opposite. Like it's hot and you're burning up again. It's like you're just spent. You're like, hey, like, yeah, it's tough to motivate yourself to do other things. It's just so hard. So he's like, well, I want to go bigger, right? So a lot of trades will strive to go level up, and that level up is being a builder, developer. So a lot of guys in the city kind of follow the same steps. I don't think there's as many people that kind of went the business route, be like, hey, I'm a business or entrepreneurship. I know nothing about building, but that's what I do. There is some people like that, but a lot of people have come up through the trades. And that's also how I got there. So my boss at the catering company, we were driving to a function. He was asking me, he's like, what do you want to do? I'm like, I want to do my own business. And he's like, what do you want to do? I'm like, something in IT. And he's like, really? Like, what do you know about IT? I'm like, well, nothing really. Like, I did some classes in school. He's like, well, you should do something what you know. He's like, I own a catering company because I'm a chef. And I knew everything about the restaurant, the kitchen and stuff. So it was a natural progression. Like, if your family's in construction, that's a more natural step, you know? And I'm like, damn, you're right. Right? So we had those conversations at home, and it kind of like my parents built a house at first for themselves, and my mom's super sentimental. So we bought they got this beautiful house, and she's like, well, if we move, the kids are never going to come home because it's not home, right? So my parents have been in the same house for 30 years because we're just so attached. And then when they sold it, it was like, hey, we just actually made a lot of money, right? So that kind of like similar, be like, well, let's do it for money, right? So at the beginning, you subcontract most things out in construction, just the way the business model is. So there's some things hands-on you do, but you know, like the whole family's involved, or we're a tight unit, everyone's helping out. So in those early days, like the amount of hours involved is little when you have 3 or 4 people contributing. So we all kind of did it as part-time, and we all had other jobs. My dad was framing, Tom was in a restaurant, you know, I was doing other things. And then it got to a point where, you know, we're doing 2 houses and people approached us. They're like, hey, I've seen you guys build a house. Can you build me a house? Like, look at this house. This is awesome. I want one of these, right? And we're like, you know, like, we're really good at building houses, but we've never built a house for somebody. It's like, but hey, if you're willing to trust us with it, like, we'll knock it out of the park. That'll be like some places that situations we've never gone through. But if you're willing to work with us, we're willing to work with you, right? So that was like our first client build, and then it just kind of snowballed in a way that it's like all of a sudden, you know, we're doing half specs, half client builds.
How many years ago was this? When you're kind of just like
that was probably 12 years ago or something like that, right? And the industry is just so tough because it's there's a lot of capital investment. Like, not people are just like, hey, I'm going to build $1 million or $2 million house. Like, that doesn't happen because most people don't have that money or don't have access to that money. So, you know, so it takes a long time for you to even build up a portfolio of what you can do, right? And when people are shopping for a home builder, you know, they want to make sure that, hey, you've done it and that you have the experience doing it. So it's hard for guys starting out, be like, hey, I'll do it for you, but I've only done it once, right? That doesn't exude a lot of confidence in people being like, you know, it's like, I did it once, I'll do it again, right? It's like there's a little bit of uneasiness probably for most people. When you're handing off your life savings for a lot of people, and it's a big money, it's emotional, right? So there was a little bit of a tipping point. We had these clients, and then it was great. And then at a certain point, maybe like 6 or 7 years ago, we decided to scale up. But one thing I've always been really conscious of is in the really high-end game of the home building, you can't have big volume. It's like traditionally it's been like up to 5 or 6 projects at a time, and anybody who goes over just dies. It's like when you look at the guys that were top of their game 10 years ago, they're not doing a lot now or nothing. It's a crazy thing. It's so heavily hands-on in a way that it's like you really gotta watch. Like when you look at dollars, it's not a small business, it's a medium-sized business, but it's really hard to take it to a large-scale business on the custom side. On the production side, when they're all kind of the same, you follow the same blueprint, I think it's easy. But on the custom side, you got to be cautious not to overdo it, right?
Why is that? Do you think it's the like customer service, the relationship side that just you can't lose that, and if you scale it too big, then you kind of lose touch with the people, or what is it?
In a way, it's hard. In a way, it's the same pieces. You put them together differently, right? I think it takes like just judging what has happened to other builders before us when they get big, so they get more people involved. And I think it's just like one bad apple will spoil the pot, if that's a phrase even in English. I don't know.
Sounds great to me.
I just made it up. And it's if things go bad and you only do so many projects, words get out. Like we've had clients that will literally name every house we built in their neighborhood in the last 10 years. And they know the people, right? It's like Calgary's a pretty tight-knit community. Yeah. So word travels fast, right? And it's especially in this. So we scaled up at a certain point. We're like, hey, it's twice the headaches for 10% more money. So we kind of went back. Yeah. We've grown a little bit the last couple of years. There's a business coach in Edmonton we see. And we talked through some of this with him, and he said, like, we're like, hey, we're at full capacity, right? Like, what do we do?
Yeah.
Right? And it's like, and money has never been the driver, right? It's kind of like, we just wanted to literally like build the best house. Like, we all make a living. Like, we're not getting rich, I guess, depending which perspective you're looking from, right? Yeah. It's like we make a good living, but it's like, that's not our motivating factor. Our motivating factor is like literally make the best thing ever possible. Like, everything's value driven. So we'll advise our clients, hey, you should spend more money here. Or somebody's like, no, you should spend less money here because it's just, there's no value in it. But they're making those calls. If they find it valuable, we'll do it for them, right? So then we scaled up, then we kind of scaled down, and we were like, hey, the headaches are not worth it. And now we're kind of back up. But the business coach. I lost my train of thought.
I was going to get you there. No, you got there yourself.
I was like, where was I going?
No, I know.
And what he was saying is that his advice was like, don't raise your prices, because it's like there's huge demand now, but it's like it's cyclical. And Calgary is so cyclical with a lot of things, but the building is like crazy. There's like ups and downs, right? And I think for the most part, it's always been tied with oil price. I think a little bit less this cycle, but like oil's high typically. Like people just spend, and then it's like goes down, and people are like, oh man, like am I gonna have a job? Like we can't afford this, right? Yeah. So you got to ride it out. Like now we're in a high, so we get like people reaching out nonstop. Can you build me a house? And it's always like, well, like we're fully booked for next 3 years out. Like you want to wait. Yeah. Right. And that was his advice. It's like, don't raise your prices, because then your pipeline's going to get smaller. Right. So it's kind of like, instead of raising prices, not getting as many people want to build with you, just going to be more choosy about your projects.
Interesting.
And then one thing that we're fully open to our clients is like, we call them, we're dating them at the beginning. They'll reach out, we're like, hey, let's date for a little bit. We all got to make sure that there's no crazy people around the table. Yeah. Right. Like it's a long timeline, right? Like best case, it's like 6 months till ground break. Then we're together like 12, 14, 16, some years. Some projects, like big ones, will be 2 years. And then afterwards, you're still going to be like good friends, good relationship, that you can pick up your builder and be like, hey, like this drawer is not working properly. Can you come fix it, right? So you try to, just make sure it's a good match. And I think that's really important. Like at the beginning of any business owner, be like, you probably take anything you can get. But one thing we've learned over the years is that there's just some people you can't make happy, right? And it's identifying those people. We call them, it's like saying it nicely. It's like you can't make them happy. Some people just call them, hey, they're crazy. Whatever the words you want to use, but some people's expectations are just not realistic, right? And we've been over the years. I think we've been good at identifying it for the most part, right? Just to make sure, and maybe it's just our character, right? You just jive better with some people than others, right? Maybe type A's like go really well with type A's, right? Or will they clash? I don't know. I'm not a type A. Yeah. So we'll meet with people and we're kind of like, hey, like non-committal meetings will help you through the process, like get a little bit farther in, then we can like, then we could figure out if this is a good match. Like, are we the right ones for you? Yep. Are you the right ones for us? Like, let's keep that conversation going. And the beauty part of like being a family business is like, no one has a hidden agenda. Like you have a business partner, like, I guess I've never had one, like outside of family being like, well, do they have a plan or some sort? Like, I want you, like, there's gotta be those instances where kind of like maybe the priorities are different. Yep. Whether in a family business, like you're all pulling the same way, right? It's just like, so we try to identify like what's the best match, and it's like I'm a horrible judge of character. Like I'm like, hey, they're awesome, and Tom's like, well, I don't know, right? And maybe because like we were talking, like he's been in a people environment for long, like service industry, right? And he'd be like, hey, like that's maybe a better match than this would be. So he's a little bit better judge of character, and we just bring different skill sets to you, right? It's like when I think of solo business owners or solo entrepreneurs, like it's gonna be hard. It's gonna be way harder than having a partner, right? Like sometimes I'll really like stress out over something. Like you wake up like in the middle of the night, like 3 or 4, you're just like, oh man. But it's like you talk it out of somebody, and you don't have to catch them up. They know they're on the same level as you, and just talk it through. Right. But it's like for solo entrepreneurs, there's circles, and it's kind of like you have breakfast with your group, kind of bounce ideas. And we got a friend who's also an entrepreneur, so we meet up for breakfast, kind of bounce things like what is he working through, what we're working through, and kind of like a different idea. But having that kind of like inside your family where everybody's it's like it's super, super awesome to kind of get through those hurdles in a way, right?
It's rare though too, right? Because there's for your family story that's positive and working. Yeah. Then there's the other family stories that are just train wrecks. So it's like it's
weird how do people determine that, right?
It's funny how you just kind of snuck into the family, because I was going to ask you that. I was going to ask you that exact question of like the family dynamics. Being obviously it's awesome for you guys. There's
it's like a lot of people will ask like, why isn't your wife involved, right? Like why isn't she designing or doing this? And it's at a certain point, our family dinners were turning into like business discussions because you couldn't separate the two. And then Lisa's just like, oh man, like you guys gotta stop that, right? It was a bit of like a wake up call, like you're totally right. Yeah. And that's what I actually like not having my wife part of it, right? Because I can come, tell her about my day, and like being married to a flight attendant is awesome because she's always got awesome stories. She was just gone for 3 days, right? She was just in Dublin last week, spent 24 hours there, and she's like, so in Wednesday they call it jump seat confessional. So the plane's taking off, there's a flight beside you, and they're all outgoing extroverts. And like within 2 minutes, you know each other's life stories, and there's no holding back. Everybody talks about anything and everything, right? Because you'll probably never go see that person again. So she's like, hey, I worked with this person that's doing this, or this happened. So we always have like an awesome catch up when she's gone for like 2 hours of a dinner. It's like full nonstop conversation, which I don't know if other couples get when they have jobs that don't have as much going on. Yeah. So I really like that separation with her. And then with family, with like my parents and my brother, it was kind of like, hey, like when we do family stuff, like we can't do work stuff. Like we can't let the family like disappear that we're a business now, right? Yeah. So we kind of drew a hard line, like, okay, well, like, business hours, maybe after, like occasionally, like if you get a text, but it's like Sundays when it's family dinner, like no business talk, right? So that was quite important to us, and that's important to me now, right? That it's kind of like it's easy to get sucked into it because you care so much. Yeah. But you got to draw a boundary to kind of not fully take over your life in a way.
Did you when you went to that entrepreneurship program? Yeah. Was there anything there that stuck with you or has stuck with you over all these years and where you are today? Is there anything that you were just like, yeah, this what I learned back then is how I'm approaching things right now?
I've actually never analyzed it. There's got to be things. There's things you learn as like a lens, but
nothing top of mind.
The coolest part was that there was 3 guys that came in from the business world, investors, and you got to present your term project for them.
What was yours?
Wi-Fi on the sea train. It was before like Wi-Fi was readily available. Okay. Like we forget about those days, right? When you just had a stupid phone. Yep. And it's like like your Nokia 500, whatever it was, like no internet, just like phone calls and playing Snake, right? And I was like, well, people are commuting. Like imagine everybody had internet, they would be like more productive for half an hour. You could either cut down your work day or do stuff like that. And then it's like became reality. I think the numbers didn't work. Because we had a kind of the technology figured out, but we didn't have the finances, and kind of like you just don't know what to do with that idea, right? But the panel that comes in, it's kind of like they give you feedback, and I remember I tried to explain something. They're just kind of like we're just telling you. We don't want to hear excuses or something wise and something like that. I was just kind of like, whoa, it's like this ain't my prof talking that's coaching me through it. Like this is the real world, right? It's kind of like. yeah, this is the weak part. And they're telling you your baby's ugly, right? No one wants to hear the baby's ugly, but they're telling you your baby's ugly. So you don't know how to react, right? And like things I feel like now when you meet with people, it's kind of like, I think at school, they kind of teach you how to sell. And I think the more you're in a business, you never sell. You just like something that you do as a business, you storytell, right?
Yeah.
Like this is what we do. This is what we value. This is how we do it. This is the way we see things.
Yeah.
And it's just like something that we offer that not a lot of our competitors offer. Like there's a handful of guys that will do an amazing house. They'll be like, hey, you build with them, you'll be super happy, right?
Yeah.
We can alter our process to our clients. We've worked with clients who are extremely busy that they'll give us 60 minutes once a month, and we gotta like bang off everything. And there's people that it becomes their baby.
For sure.
Right? And we've done a lot of work for engineers, and they're kind of like, they want to know everything, right?
Yeah.
And we're there to kind of be like, hey, once a week, hour and a half or 2 hours on site, we'll go through it, pros and cons, why everything's like that. So we have that flexibility. Like, you want to come to site every day? Hey, we'll meet you on site every day. If you want to be super hands off, we'll take it from that. So altering the process for people is kind of something we do. But like one thing, like more recently, through the tougher times of COVID and the fallout it has had on the labor force, like everybody's hurting for workers, like across industries. The first year of COVID was like supply chain. Now it's all labor. And just kind of helping navigate clients and just kind of making sure, like one thing is just the journey to get to a final place. Like the final place could be amazing, but we need to place some major emphasis on the journey there, right? And if some clients we really click, it's this, but some people just expect a different journey. But you gotta keep those communication lines open, right? And it's just, I think the word of 2023 would be like, hey, let's make sure the journey is just as good as the destination, right? Because
I agree. Yeah, and that the journey piece, it kind of goes into the storytelling idea too, right? The kind of you're building a story around a journey, which makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So
where's this going to go? This is, it's not like you're I'm catching you at an interesting time because it's not like 30 years. It's not, the business has been around.
Yeah.
It's known.
Yeah.
But it's still pretty early in the game. Do you have, does the family talk about where this thing's going to go?
We short term and not long term.
Yeah.
Right. It's, I feel like the goal is to maybe retire earlier than some people. I think some people are like, hey, I want to be a contributing member till 68, 69. I'd like to do it a little earlier, right? Yeah. I like doing other things more. Other things than just working. But in the short term, it's like, it's been so awesome and it seems like it's getting awesomer, if that's the word. It's like, we just keep getting teamed up with like really awesome clients.
So why is that? It's not a fluke. You can't say it's a fluke. You've put your time in to kind of to figure out your like radar with people and how to read. So, what is it?
I don't know what the magic juice is, right? And it's like, in a way, but I think it's like, so we're 20 years into this, right? Like, sure, the first 5 or 6 years were part time, but it's kind of like, we've done some great projects, which we're thankful for to our previous trades and our clients that were kind of like, hey, I'm going to trust you with this, right? So the next round of people are kind of like, whoa, you guys have done all this cool stuff, right? There's only a handful of people that can do this, right? So it's like, hey, you want a underground walkway? We'll do it. We're doing a lot of pools, elevators, like all these things that are people are like this, and we're like, yeah, we've done it. Like, we'll do it again, and then. I was mentioning off the air is that in the way that we're a little bit unique is that we don't have an in-house designer or an in-house architect, which is really the creative part of the whole big picture. So we team up with a different architect designer in the city, and we've worked with like really top names in the city. Like, we've done a lot of work with a lot of different guys, and it's like, so even last year I was like, hey, I really want to do work. I have like a bucket list. I'm like, it's like, I want to work with Marvin de Jong, and now we're like, Mark Burkhart from Little Giant, and like, so we're doing a project with him, and just the way they approach things, it's like, it's so unique and so different. Like, he was on site, and he's got a wind graph, right? He's like, oh, in these months the wind comes from this way, and the angle of the sun is this, and you're just like, I bet if a lot of architects, like, no one has talked like this is like next level, right? And by being exposed to all these people that are really at the top of their game, I feel like you learn a little bit something from them. So every new project, we bring in a little bit extra. Like I feel that like our knowledge base is just getting bigger and bigger the more we kind of like work with different people. And then that's the value proposition that we bring to our clients, being like, hey, we'll let's do this. Like ideas that it's like maybe someone that's only done it a certain way maybe hasn't thought of. Like we're just like everywhere. We're just gonna collect it all and propose that. The really rewarding part of it is that majority of our latest clients, and it's like it's weird to say, and maybe people hear it, it's weird. It's kind of like they're like, it's gonna cost what it's gonna cost, and I want you to do it. Whether the first part of our like first many years of our business, you're always like bidding on things. Whether now it's like, hey, I know you guys are fair. You guys are going to deliver value. You just tell me what it's going to cost, because we always have a budget. Everybody has a budget. It doesn't matter how big the build. And then we're accountable to that budget. But it's not like the decision when most of our clients recently have hired us had nothing to do with money, which is kind of like a super cool thing to do. It'd be like, hey, you guys have built for these guys. And they had an amazing experience, right? Like I want to have that experience building a house. It's so rewarding. And they said, you guys are awesome. Let's do it. And we're just like, and that feels good, right? When people are kind of like so happy, not just from a financial perspective, because it's a lot of money, but just from the journey they had and the experience they had, that they get to enjoy their home. And we always tell people like down the road, like anything happens, call us first. I'll know the plumber that did it. It's probably still working for us, right? Like we'll get you fixed up, because the thing with the trades is that no matter who does it and how well they do it, a different plumber will come in. And the first thing they'll say is like, oh, this is all wrong. I'll do it differently, right? It's like the way they want to show value by like saying that, hey, I would have done it better, right? So I'm like, hey, call me first. I'll get the guy that did it. We'll figure it out for you, right?
It's a reputation. You've built a reputation over all these years, but it takes a long time to do it.
It's
not overnight, right?
No, right? And the craziest part of it is like we've done it with no marketing, no storytelling. Like it's really cool. Like, hey, we gotta team up, like do a story, right? But it's all word of mouth, right? And it's like that word of mouth has gotten so big that it's like when people are like, hey, can you buy a house? It's like, well, yeah, but you're probably not getting into your house for 3 years because we can't start anything for a year and a half. But the most surprising people, and I tell people straight up, I was like, if I were you, I wouldn't wait. I'm like, we're in an inflationary period. But people are like, no, it's got to be you guys, right? So that's super cool, right? And then so we just continue the dating game, right? So then when we're like, when we get to the build, everyone's super comfortable with each other. There's been lots of months of bouncing ideas, and like literally, there's not a lot of clients that I wouldn't call friends at this point, right? That's like cool. Obviously we're small volume, so it's kind of like, hey. And for this year, majority of our work is actually repeat clientele, right? Cool. It's always like forever house, but they're like, hey, this lot came up on my block, I didn't really like it. I bought it. I told you to do it again. So it's cool doing it of the same people the second time. They're kind of like, hey, this was so awesome the first time. Let's do it again.
That's cool, man. I have a solid understanding of the industry in Calgary. It's unique to have that feeling, because the industry is pretty ugly. Can be.
It can be, right? It's also like, I think part of it's like in a way that it's and a phrase I heard on one of your previous shows, I believe it was yours. If it's not, we'll just pretend it was. Is the term called the race to the bottom?
That's here.
Right. And in the luxury high-end homes, it's not a race to the bottom. It's a race to quality and value. Right. And I think we're all racing, but we're racing in a different direction than guys who are producing production homes. That game, it's harder because it's so much dollars and cents, right? Just a different customer. Whether everybody in the higher game, they're not driven by every dollar and cent. They're driven by excellence and value, right? Like when we had to summarize everything, it's just like, we'll give you the best value. It will make your money go the farthest, right? Like one of the coolest things that happen, it's like I don't want to brag, but it's kind of so rewarding, is that 3 years ago we won Builder of the Year, and we only did 4 houses in Calgary, right? So there's maybe like 10 categories, different price ranges, and 3 of those were like House of the Year in Calgary, but that's not the coolest part. Like the coolest part is like we won it for like a basic $500,000 house, and we did it for like a $3 million house. So when I tell people, it's kind of like we brought the best value at both ends of the spectrum, which I think is like quite rare. There's a couple of guys now that have done it as well. I was just like, whoa, like that's hard. You know, it's kind of like, because you're dealing with different trades, different suppliers, you're delivering on different points.
Yeah.
But it was like pretty cool to see, be like, hey, it doesn't matter. So now we tell people like, doesn't matter how much money you have, like we'll hit a home run with him, right? Like we'll make it go the farthest.
That's cool.
Yeah, so that's it in a nutshell.
It's not bragging, you know. It's a proud moment, you know. That's especially a family business to kind of pull off an award like that. It's a big thing.
Yeah, and it was cool. Like a lot of guys in our industry, they're just so stoked for us. Right?
It's awesome.
They're like, well, one for the good guys, right?
Which
so
is
it's
awesome.
and then it's like you get judged by your peers in the industry and stuff. So it was
cool.
it's super cool, right?
Super cool.
And then just different projects coming up, and they're all different. So we do everything custom. So every project is different. Like super rewarding.
Yeah, they're very creative.
Yeah, very much so.
This has been a cool one.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for doing this. And you didn't know that I have this like depth of knowledge in the industry before, because I didn't want to tell you, because it's that's why it's such an untapped story in Calgary. You know, Calgary. People look at the housing market as this thing, like it's going off. There's all these big things happening, right? But I love hearing it from the ground level. You know, like the people that are actually on the tools, doing the things. Like it's a totally different perspective.
Yeah, thank you. It's been great being on. Thank you for having me on. Yeah. Like, I feel honored. You know, we got such big names, big Calgarians. I was like, what am I gonna say? You know, it's
But yeah, everyone's got a story.
It's true.
You know, and there's just, you know, your story is way different because of your upbringing, and you know, that's a different way to show up in Calgary. So it's I'm glad you thought that. Like, what am I going to say based on some of the wild characters?
Yeah.
But it's really cool, man. It's this industry's got a soft spot in me, so it's I'm glad you took the time to do this.
And a lot of people obviously think the same thing about Calgary, what my dad thought 30 years ago.
Yeah.
Look at the immigration into the city is just blowing up. We got people coming from a lot of BC residents in Ontario, because like Calgary's seems like it's the place to be, right? Like everybody wants to be us.
Totally. Which is the perfect segue to the final question. When I say Calgary, where's your head go?
I thought about this because I heard it before, right? So, you know, like first, like when you say Calgary, you see the skyline, right? But like to me, it's more like you go from the skyline to different parts of the city, and like growing up as a Calgarian, almost like a Calgarian, not born and raised, but a Calgarian.
Yeah.
You just have different memories from different parts of the city with different people, you know, different friends. And it's just something that got proven true before we were talking over the air, is that Calgary really is a 2 degrees of separation city. It's like, it's such a big town, but everybody seems to know everybody. Like it's rare you'll meet someone and you don't have someone in common, right? So I think of Calgary as like a really big, super connected city that everybody seems to really know each other through 2 degrees of separation.
I agree. And I think it's, I don't know why. I think a lot of people feel that same way. I think other people probably are like, what the fuck are these guys talking about? Like it's not a thing. But I think part of it is just, you know, this might be like super cliche, but if you're a good person, you know, you don't fuck people up.
Yeah.
You know, and you just get in more circles.
Yeah.
That 2 degrees happens pretty quick.
Yeah, 100%.
Thanks again for taking the time.
Thank you. Keep doing the good work.
Thank you. Appreciate it.